What makes Go Down Moses so important to Faulkner's career is that it marks the time when he is able to make some general statement of affirmation. Puts the $1,000 in the bank to be doled out slowly. And he gives Lucas his. And he's able to confront it, condition of prevailing. Able to do both of these things. He's able to judge himself and suffer it. Really full of stewardship, which is so important to Faulkner's whole social vision, while at the same time avoiding justice. Since men fail. Myth, turn it upside down, and counter the effects of very serious treatment of racial matters in doesn't get into the sun. He doesn't really stick throughout his life. Goes back prior to the time that I chose an academic career, and my feeling for the state, the region, and the kind of atmosphere I grew up in. I think that's keeps it from seeming quite so schizophrenic to me.
Don't you run into
So why this jump over here? Well, because in turn do the thing in the commissary house that he does in Part 4.
Things for the committee today?
most of them? Most of them. But ways of thinking and so forth.
Well, not two ways of thinking. Now, you don't. It's an old habit in the South that we adjust our speech to our audience in order to be civil to them. That we talk one way to children and another way to servants and another way to close family. And there's more than one kind of political speech, of discourse. But I think that the thing that makes it easy for me is that I grew up in this part of Texas, and I've not always been an academician, and all the selves that are in me are still there, and refuse to provide for the possibility of consideration of new business. What we do is announce to the world to hear the variety of sentiment which is obviously present on this committee. I expect to be opposed to a good deal of the new business that's presented. I don't think that we can call ourselves the Democratic Party and refuse to provide for such new business on our agenda. Therefore, I support the amendment advanced by this gentleman.
I'd like to have the right to close if anybody wants to speak against it.
Anybody want to oppose? They're not going to be morally bullied into believing that it's a bad identity because it's rooted in everything that they love, what gave them life and substance. And I think they're right about it.
Man who is at once a professor and a critic and a writer, and on the other hand a political boss. What produces that kind of man?
Well, I think, again, you have to go back prior to the academic thing to understand the impetus. I've tried to think about it myself a little bit lately. But I think the explanation is in the fact that I grew up in a family that was deeply rooted in father was instrumental in founding the American Party in Oklahoma in '68. And, I heard politics discussed in his house and in my grandfather's house as far back as I can remember, and it was always the same politics.
Call on Ms. Margaret Carter, the State Democratic Executive, Dr.
Sanford, members of
or Texas, a housewife,
a mother, a part-time businesswoman, and most important, a Democrat interested in good government. Thank you for this opportunity to
the interim or midterm convention. In the last one time and another, been all over the ballpark on a whole spectrum of issues, and the party has, to say the least, in the interim between Buchanan and Pierce, or if you want to go back.
Democrats ought to have a difference of opinions, and agree with Will Rogers when he said
ourselves as national Democrats. And in a not
This needs a presidential preference primary. I'm going to favor that on the state executive committee. I think that the present state committee Democratic candidate this year did not receive the vote of the Wallace people in this county. I could have stood on my head downtown
saying, and things have changed a little bit, like the way
Democratic Party is not able to command the Wallace vote, or what we can roughly call the Wallace vote in 1972. It will win no national elections in the foreseeable future. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Governor Sanders,
Yes.
I am going to have
their head in the sand and said, "Oh my, this won't happen again," and whatnot. And they behave as if we weren't here. And
items spoken about by us, we found
somebody said I was running.
Yourself politically.
Well, I'd be fancy about it and say that I'm a tertium quid Democrat, a John Randolph Democrat, an old Republican, small r Republican, whose political philosophy is pretty much rooted in Randolph and John Taylor of Caroline. I learned a little bit from John Adams, too, though he is Yankee, and Federalist. But the tertium quids were the ones who broke off they helped elect Jefferson, and then they broke off from him when, after his election, he began to find the pleasures of office and the advantages of the central authority too tempting, and violated his announced philosophy and created a little bit of a schism there. And they were the people, really, who formulated the doctrine which led the South to secession in 1860. Speak very bluntly. Body go on record advising the Rules Committee to draw up rules that omit or specifically preclude the operation of the so-called quota system as being anything but an advisory function in the selection of delegates to.
All right, we're voting right now, so that everyone in this body will know we're voting right now.
I believe, that as many people as vote now should vote. I'd like to see the franchise restricted on very fair and equitable grounds. And
words that are commonly heard and thrown about, mostly incorrectly. At any rate, they are thrown about quite a bit. And you just tell me whatever comes to your mind first. If you want to recline back on the couch.
No, that's all right.
Okay.
We don't have to be.
Liberalism.
Well, the difference between 20th and 19th century liberalism, I think it's important to start with. 19th century liberalism is libertarianism, which is freedom from restraint. 20th century liberalism tends to be the opposite. It tends to be millennialism of one degree or another, aimed at producing through social and legislative engineering one kind of millennium or another.
What do you
coercive.
redneck?
Well, that's what the late Dick Weaver called a devil term. One thing it is, though, it's a term of honor. It means a man stays outside and does a day's work.
Okay, it's connotative meaning.
It's connotative meaning is what it suggests to me is farmer or construction worker, fellow who works outside, and it also means, of course, the working Southern middle class.
I was just getting ready to ask you a very blunt question. Do you consider yourself a redneck?
Well, I've got a good many things in common with them, I hope. Oh my, there's another devil term. I think, strictly speaking, a racist is somebody who wants to do injury to somebody else, not because of his own particular good or the common good, but simply because they happen to belong to a race. Now, the racism we're talking about, up, down, better, worst, better, best, worst, and so forth. But there's another kind of race feeling that says like, different, not up, down, but one thing, one another, excellences of their own kind. And I think that type of racism, if you want to call it racism, is endemic and indestructible. And it's weariness and vexation of the spirit. Like cutting grass. It's never finished, never done. Free association, the first word that comes to my mind with politics is the telephone. The ills the flesh is heir to, original sin.
Okay. Teddy Kennedy.
Gutted by the experience of cliffhangers and close defeats and disappointments, so that he actually believes the country is going the other way, and he thinks of the business of the Republican Party as to administer a slow retreat. Patria. P-A-T-R-I-A. The buried nation.
Why?
Oh, very dangerous word. The tyrant demos. I don't mind saying that a policy is democratic. I like that. Democracy, capital D, like equality, capital E, is a very dangerous word. One, it's an unrealizable thing. Two, it's unmanageable. Three, it's exactly what Plato said it was. Four, it's something that most Americans would like to have quite a good deal of, but not too much.
Texas.
Freedom. The absolute of the libertarian, not necessarily my absolute, I'll say that, the absolute value of the libertarian. It's the precondition of making significant moral choices, though, and I think that's what we're here in the world to do, is to make, to prove ourselves by making a number of these. And personal freedom is something that I cherish pretty fanatically.
Long ambition in mind?
Well, I suppose my political ambition could be described this way, that I have participated in the public life the last few years because I care about what I call the historic thrust of the political and social experience of this state. I think that it embodies a kind of valuable wisdom, a wisdom that I experienced as a child and a young man, the benefits of that wisdom. And it's a feeling of stewardship. I think I have a little piece of it in my keeping now, and even though I find politics often very burdensome, I'm not going to turn away from it as long as I can help to keep alive some things that are very, very precious to me. It's fun, and I like to give them hell.